welcome back to another episode of Your Dose, the podcast where we speak to individuals with lived mental health experiences to help people feel less alone and more connected. If you are listening to this when it is released, which is Christmas Eve, I hope you are very much in the festive spirit and have a lovely Christmas and a very happy New Year. This will be the last podcast now of this year. So I just want to say a huge thank you for all of the support. I cannot believe that I started a podcast in my bedroom in May with absolutely no experience. And I have people who literally listen in every single week for my podcast. And I am just so grateful. So thank you so much. And I promise that in 2024, I will bring even more interesting guests and topics and continue to work towards my mission of destigmatizing mental health and, most importantly, making people feel less alone. Now, in this episode, we are speaking with Luke, the founder of the Stress Sessions. This podcast took a long while to organise, and full transparency, I didn't have any of my podcast equipment for this, but you know what? Some of my best podcasts were originally recorded without any podcast equipment. So I apologise for the sound quality on this one, but the content is hopefully interesting enough that it will overshadow that. Luke is going to be sharing his experience of starting the Stress Sessions podcast as a way to cope with his own mental health struggles, specifically with anxiety and depression. We discussed the challenges of speaking openly about mental health and the impact of sobriety on mental well-being. Luke shares his daily self-care practices, including breathing exercises, morning dips, and open communication. He concludes by discussing his future plans for the Stress Sessions podcast and offers advice for those struggling with mental health issues. So thanks again, Luke, for sitting down with me and having this conversation. I really hope you guys enjoy the episode, and one last time, have an amazing Christmas, and thanks again for all your support. Welcome back to the Your Dose podcast. Today we are joined with Luke, finally. Hello, Luke.
Hello, how's it going?
Yeah, I'm good. If any of the listeners are even slightly interested, this has took me and Luke actually quite a while, because I reached out to you, oh my gosh, ages ago now, and was trying to find a date and time, and then we couldn't find a date or time. And then I moved to Australia and we finally got a time last week. Then it didn't work out because my podcast room was closed. And then this morning we've had a very similar situation as well, which has not been ideal. So, but we're here finally, which I'm very happy about. What time is it there, Luke? Because I'm in Australia, so it's 7 a.m. here.
So it's just gone 20 past 8 here. So it's late-ish, but not really. It's
not that late.
Evening.
And whereabouts in the world are you based?
So I'm from Milton Keynes for people that don't know where Milton Keynes is, it's sort of north of London, because that's where most people, I guess, know where whereabouts is in the UK. So yeah, north of London. Been here for about 12 years now. After moving up from Kent. So I was born in Kent, moved up here to be with my now wife, and just been here ever since.
And you get involved in some morning dips in Bournemouth?
Yeah, there's a group called the Blue Tits that I found out about last year. So I started doing open water swimming in, I think it was October last year, and I'd never done anything like that before. And
really?
Basically, my mate, no, I've never done it. So my mate going back, I'll go back before that. So one of my friends, now friends, who lives in Milton Keynes, she's a professional badminton player, plays with Team GB, and I think we started following each other on Instagram like a couple of years ago. And I asked her to be a part of I did 110Ks in a row last year for charity. And on one of those runs, she was like,
what? 110Ks in a row?
yeah.
Wait,
Yeah.
over what period of time?
So it's through the summer, which was insane.
Oh.
And, so it's last summer when it was really hot. So, when it's about mid-30s, late 30 degrees, I was doing it then. But basically on one of the runs, my mate was like, you should try open water swimming. I've started going to this club called the Blue Tits, and I went with her once and got hooked. And I go some weekends now, but the main one I try and go to is on a Wednesday morning at 6 o'clock in the morning. So it just helps my mental health, keeps me level. Cold water's good for you. I wouldn't have believed that a few years ago, but yes, it's really helped me, and it's a bit of a routine for me now. So yeah, I love it. It's good.
Wow. And because so it's a big thing in Australia to do a morning dip or just go for a dip. Like it was bizarre when made some new friends, and they were like, "Oh, do you want to come for a dip tomorrow?" And I was like, what do you mean? And they're like, "Oh yeah, we're going for like a sunrise swim," which is insane. But yeah, I mean, the water here is cold. I can't imagine what the water's like there. And I'm assuming, do you do it throughout winter, or is it too cold to do it throughout winter?
I've not been for the last few weeks, so I can't tell you what the temperature is now. But when I went about 3 weeks ago, it was 7 or 8 degrees, I think.
And how
but it gets down to about 5 degrees. Last winter when I first started swimming, it was that winter where it's like frozen over. So the lake that I was swimming was completely frozen. So you had to like literally chisel the ice and get in, and yeah, it's really cool. But it's probably about 10 degrees at the minute because it's not that cold at the minute, is it?
And how long would you stay in the water for?
Depends. I think with stuff like that, you have to listen to your body, so you don't stay in for a set amount of time.
Can't it, to stay in there for?
Yeah. But I've been doing it for just over a year now, so I sort of know how long to stay in for. But usually it's for every degree. So if it's like 6 degrees, you're staying for 6 minutes. If it's 10 degrees, you're staying for 10 minutes. That's sort of how people work it out. But I've heard people have done that, and it's been a bit dangerous at times.
Yeah, well, my now gym has an ice bath, so I'm yet to get in that. And the owner was smashing it with a kettlebell, the ice. So sounds similar to
Wow.
Yeah. And you recently did a half marathon. Is that right or no?
Yeah, I did a half marathon on Sunday.
And how was that?
So yeah, it's all right. So I've been ill for the last few weeks, so I've not really trained for it. But it was fine. I ended up getting my second best ever half marathon time. I think that's because I just didn't worry about getting a time, if that makes sense. So usually I'm into like, I've got to get this specific time when I'm running, but I just sort of ran that one, and yeah, it's good. It's really wet at the end because it's like completely waterlogged, but yeah, no, it's good.
I think you enjoy it more when you don't set yourself a time and you're not focused so much on the pace. And like the one time that I ran and took my watch off, which was on race day, the half marathon, I got my best time yet. But I also think it helps when you're like in a crowd of people and you've got the atmosphere. Like running on your own is quite difficult. And I guess it's I mean, mentally running is just so hard to be able to like constantly push through when your mind's saying stop running, and yeah, it's definitely a mental game. But so I'm really going off on a tangent and talking about too many things first before because I want to discuss more of this later on in the episode. But before we go into the first question, I wanted to just mention about your podcast. So you have a podcast called The Stress Sessions, which we can see if anyone's watching on video behind you. So would you like to tell the listeners a little bit about the podcast, when you started it, and yeah, what exactly does The Stress Sessions talk about?
So the stress sessions started just after lockdown in 2020. It all sort of merges into one, so I can't remember what the year is, but I think it's 2020. And I started it because I was struggling with my mental health at the time. So I had quite a traumatic experience at the end of 2019, and I didn't really know what to do with that sort of emotion, and I just didn't know what to do. So I was like, oh, I need to speak about this or speak about my mental health because I was struggling quite a lot. So I was like, oh, I'll start a podcast because why not? Even though I hate speaking to people, I get really nervous about public speaking. And initially I was a bit like, nobody's going to listen to this. So it's just going to be me talking about how I'm feeling. And I've got my wife involved. So she's on my first episode, and then got a few friends involved. And it sort of escalated from there, really. And then I started branching out and being like, oh, who's kind of like, who's also struggling with their mental health, that's like who I follow on Instagram. So I just started being like, oh, there's a former footballer that I really love that played for my local team back in Kent. Spoke to him, had a chat with him, and he was lovely and really opened up about kind of football back in the day, because I think he played in the 90s.
Yeah.
So it just sort of went from there, really. And then I've ended up speaking to people about their mental health that I never thought I'd speak to. So
Really?
it's just been a massive sort of whirlwind, to be honest. Yeah.
And what has been your biggest podcast achievement so far, and your biggest fail?
It's been a few fails. So I'll say biggest achievements of before the biggest achievement that I probably now have, I'd say it's just getting it started, because I think a lot of people start podcasts but they don't persevere with them. So I think my biggest achievement, I'd say, is to just keep persevering, because I started it because it helped me, and because it helped me, I thought I'm going to keep doing this because I'm getting to speak about how I'm feeling, and speaking to other people that are also struggling a little bit with anxiety, depression, eating disorders. And just by having those conversations with different people from all walks of life, it just really helps me look at myself a little bit more and be like, oh, I'm not struggling with this stuff on my own. Other people are going through it as well. So I think that just opening up and keeping it going was probably still is my biggest achievement, to be honest. But a couple of months when we started trying to set this up, I was organising a live show, and that was in September. So it's what, 3 months on now, pretty much. And that's probably the biggest achievement now, just because people actually came to
That's crazy.
watch me talk about my mental health, which it is ridiculous.
Wow.
And it was just really, it was really weird, because one, people turned up, two, all my like people that I spoke to turned up, and it was just such a lovely evening. And I didn't really know what to expect from it, because I don't think you can predict what's going to happen in those situations, because it's a bit like, I'm so shit scared. Can I swear on this? Is that right? Or
of course you can.
yeah, okay, cool. But yeah, I was literally shitting my pants the whole time, and I didn't know it's going to happen. I didn't know if I was going to be able to do it, because I don't like public speaking. But because the people that I spoke to, my guests, were so open and just lovely people, it got me through. And it's the support that the audience gave, my guests gave me, and my wife, my family. That's my biggest achievement, just because I was a bit like, how the hell have I put on a live show about something that I hadn't spoken about before, like 3 years ago? It's mental.
Did you ever expect it to take that journey when you, like even a year ago? Did you ever think about doing a live show?
Not really. I don't know. I don't even know why it happened. I don't know. Literally don't know why it became a thing. I think it just pops into my head, and because throughout the past 3 years, I pushed myself, like constantly push myself. I just thought, why can't I do that? Why can't I push myself more? And even though it scares me, it scared me initially by speaking about my mental health to begin with. And I didn't really understand mental health when I started the stress
Yeah.
sessions. I didn't really get it. But why not take that step and just
Yeah.
literally chuck yourself in the deep end again?
Yeah, that's incredible. So that's your achievement, which is incredible. But what about your fail? Because there might be people that are listening that have started a podcast, thinking of starting a podcast, um, a little bit into a podcast like me, um, and obviously you've done incredibly well. So I think it's always good to see where it can go wrong and like how did you come back from that? If there was anything that was like particularly bad.
So the worst one was there's two, and there's one that I always talk about because it's quite funny, and there's another one which was a massive fuck up by me. So the first one was I ended up having Perez Hilton on the stress sessions, which was just insane
Sorry.
because I was sick. I had Perez Hilton
Oh my gosh.
on the stress sessions, but I was in this room literally recording the podcast probably at like 1, 2 in the morning, and he was just in America, in bed. So we recorded it from his bed, which I was just like, this is insane. And as soon as we started recording, he was like, "Why have you called the stress sessions the stress sessions? Because it sounds stressful." And he basically just annihilated my podcast name for about 5 minutes.
Seriously.
Yeah, and I was just like, "It's fine. It's him. He's allowed to do this."
Did you carry on recording?
Yeah, yeah. And no, to be honest, he was such a lovely guy, and within, I think I spoke to him for just over an hour, and he completely changed my perception on him because he in the press, because he's done quite nasty stuff in the press, and he said a lot of hurtful things to high profile celebrities and get like been quite damaging, particularly towards their mental health, I think. I think because that was what 10, 15 years ago, he's completely changed his lifestyle, and he still does all of the celebrity gossip stuff, but he does it tastefully now rather than assassinating their character. But he's completely changed his life around. He does a lot of stuff for his mental health, like he does a lot of exercise, he does meditating. He's got kids now, so I think he's sort of realised that I've actually got to
Yeah. Did
be
you
nice to people.
guest or did he reach out to you?
I reached out to him, and it was it's one of those ones where I was a bit like, it took so long to organise. I didn't think it's going to happen, and it just all fell into place. But that's like the kind
Yeah.
of okayish one. The worst thing that's happened to me on the podcast is, and it's happened twice, and I think they've both been my fault, but I've not recorded 2 episodes, so I've chatted to. And
No.
one of the people I chatted to was a footballer. So it's a footballer that I used to love. This guy called Jermaine Pennant, and he used to
Okay.
play for Arsenal. And I've
Yeah.
watched him play, and I was like, this guy's great. And he's just been on the Celebrity SAS, Who Dares Wins thing on ITV,
Yeah.
and he's such a lovely guy. And he was like, "Oh yeah, I'll come on. That's fine." Blah, blah. Chatted to him for like 45 minutes. And I was like, "Oh, thanks, mate. Like, I'll send this across to you, like, so you can have a listen to it, watch it before it goes out." I didn't record it. I didn't press record. So I had to message him and be like, "Mate, I'm so sorry. Do you mind coming back on again? Because I didn't record it. Like, I was like, I can't put anything out because I've not recorded this episode." And he's like, yeah, that's fine. Like, just let me know when's good. So I booked him back in again, recorded it. It all went fine. Literally, I put that episode out while I was I don't know what I did in the background. I found the unrecorded episode, so
Oh no! And I bet the one that was the first one would have been like the better one as well, because
yeah,
when you do something the second time, it's kind of less authentic. Do you know, you kind of like
yeah.
trying to make it how it was the first time, but it's never going to be as good as the first time.
But it did sort of help because I then wasn't as nervous because I was like, oh, he's a nice guy. He's agreed to do this again. So I was, it
Oh
was
my
fine.
God.
But I didn't tell him that. He doesn't know about this.
Oh, hopefully he's not listening to this. I doubt he'll be listening to this
Yeah.
podcast. Well, thank you for sharing that, Luke. A little bit about your podcast and your experience, but I want to dive a little bit more into the mental health side of things because that's what we're here to talk about today. So, can you share more about your mental health journey so far and how it's kind of got you to where you are today?
Yeah. So I I probably didn't realize, I don't know where to start really because there's quite a lot, but like, I think when my mental health journey started, when I realized that I didn't even realize I was struggling. It was my wife that was a bit like, oh, I think you're going through a bit of a bad patch. And that, I think I was in a really deep, dark place when I was probably in my late 20s. And I think it was because, one, I was struggling with my family a little bit for various reasons.
Mm.
And I wasn't really enjoying my job at the time. So I was in a job where I I think we just moved into our house. We moved into our first house. So it's like supposed to be quite a happy time. We just got engaged. I got this new job and I just hated it. I hated the job. It was one that I'd taken because I was a bit like, oh, the money's a little bit better. But it ended up sort of being in the middle of nowhere. I didn't really have any friends at work because it was kind of like, it was such a different company to what I'd usually work for. And I just remember walking around the it was on, it's on an airfield. I used to work in a building on an airfield, which is really weird. I won't
Yeah.
name the place, but I used to walk around at lunch around this airfield, around the perimeter, just on the phone to somebody because I was just like, I hate my life at the minute. I just hate it. And I started taking calms, the little calms tablets
Tried
that you can
those.
buy in like
Been
Boots.
really,
They're shit, yeah, terrible.
yeah.
But
If you,
I was taking them, and that was kind of the start of everything, I think. And that was sort of when I was about 25, 26.
yeah,
And it got to the point where my wife was a bit like, look, I think you're really struggling. I think you need to like maybe get help. And when you just be like, I don't really know what to do here. I don't know where to turn because I didn't know anything about mental health. I didn't know about anxiety, depression. I just didn't. So my first thing was to go to the doctors. And before then, I think I can count on one hand the amount of times I've been to the doctors in my life because I've just been like, I don't need to go. Like, I'm fine. Even if I'm injured or whatever, if I've injured something playing football or whatever, I wouldn't go to doctors because it's just like I just sort myself out. But I went there, did the sort of generic, oh, have you got a mental illness test that they give you? And it came out that had high anxiety and medium depression. So I was diagnosed with anxiety and depression,
yeah,
and I don't know, it sort of hit me quite hard. And they referred me to have counselling. So I was quite lucky because I think I got referred to a counsellor pretty quickly. It was like within probably a month or something like that.
wow,
Started going to counselling sessions, and it helped. It did really help.
yeah,
But it was one of those old school counsellors where you're in a room, and I was literally like on the edge of my seat. And I remember every time I went into that room, the counsellor would go, "Oh, you're on the edge of your seat. Are you anxious?" And I'd be like, "Yeah, I'm anxious. That's why I'm here." Like, what do you think? But yeah, but I had that, and that was sort of like mid 20s, and then since then I feel like I've sort of done everything under the sun to try and help better my mental health.
Yeah.
And it's sort of ranged from stuff like doing the cold water swimming, which has been great. I love my running. I've always ran, but I feel like I've sort of upped it a lot since the diagnosis. I've tried to sort of throw myself into it a little bit more. I've had loads of counselling. Like back in the day, if somebody says to me, "I'll go and get counselling," I'll be like, "No," because that's what mental people do. Because it's kind of like stigmatized to
Yeah.
for you to think like that. But yeah, since then I've sort of tried everything, and I've sort of gone from I don't drink alcohol anymore. So I was 2 years sober yesterday.
That,
Um,
that is incredible.
it's just I've just tried everything to try and better myself, and it's weird because I feel like I've done quite a lot to try and help myself, but I'm still nowhere near done. If that makes sense, I feel like I'm not happy. Because I'm not the happiest I can be. I still want to keep going and keep like trying to improve me. If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I mean, what does happy look like for you? What would that be?
I think I've had it. I think I've had happy. I think I've
Yeah,
had it over the years, but I just want it to be more constant than the anxiety. So for instance, if you, I don't know, if you've had it or anybody listening's had it, but you'll wake up in the morning and the first thing you feel is anxious. You'll literally wake up in bed, you'll open your eyes, and you'll think, "Shit, I've got this feeling again." Like this feeling that and I woke up like that for years, years and
yeah,
years. So when going back to when I was diagnosed, like probably like a year before that till probably a couple of years ago, I had that daily, and I can't remember a day where I didn't wake up not feeling anxious. And then probably a couple of years ago, and it's probably like after I stopped drinking, I had that. I'd wake up and I'd be like, "Fuck, I'm not anxious." Like I
peace.
actually feel like a normal human being, and
Yeah,
that's what I want to get to. I want to get to that point where I can just go for a day and not worry about anything, not let anything bother me, not care about what anybody thinks of me. So like, I just want to live that life, and I don't know
yeah.
if that's possible, but I'm going to try everything that I
I
can to
love
try and get
that.
there.
Yeah, I mean, going back a little bit, because I want to talk more later on about what you do from a managing perspective, because I know there's lots of different things that you do. But in terms of your depression and anxiety, so you were 26 at the time when this started happening. Would you say that it was more anxiety symptoms? And if so, like what were some of the symptoms that you were experiencing at the time? If there is anybody listening to this who might be experiencing these things and not know what it is, like you didn't know what it is, what are some examples those of what were experiencing?
So the one thing I always say that I always link my anxiety to is, and I've not met, I don't know if I've met anybody that has this feeling, or that, I mean, they might do, but say, because you run, don't you?
Yeah, I've run. Yeah, I
So
don't
you
want.
know, so like so say like you're running down a road and you get that adrenaline rush, and it's like it's like a feel good adrenaline rush that you're like, I'm running fast. There's trees either side of me. This is great. I get to my anxious feeling is that, but it feels like shit. So I'll be, and I've going back. I get that again now, but I went through a period of not having it. But that's the way I describe it. That you're it's like you're exercising, so you've got that adrenaline rush. But in my head, I get adrenaline rush after adrenaline rush after adrenaline rush, and it's just constant in my head, and it's really weird. And I've not I've not met anybody that has that, but
Yeah,
it's
no, I
that
know
constant
exactly.
like on the go.
No, I think I kind of experienced that in a way, more so from going into like panic attack mode. But like when I was like anxious all the time, it would be like that for me. There would never be like a dip. It'd just be like all the time throughout the day, just having that weird feeling of just something's just not right. Like you're always kind of on edge, waiting for something bad to happen. Um, which I imagine is kind of what you were experiencing. But what about the depression symptoms? Was there anything in particular that you can think of?
So depression for me is it's quite a tricky one because it depression is meant to be in phases. So again, like correct me if I'm wrong, because I just go by what I've experienced. But for me, apparently, depression is supposed to come in like you'll have it and then it'll go away, and then you could get it again and it'll go away.
Yeah,
But I
yeah,
think for me, depression is like a constant thing that never goes away, and it can be it can be okay, and you can be living with it, but dealing with it, but then it could get really bad. Um, but for me, depression would be kind of like you'd overthink and overthink and overthink and catastrophize everything and go to the worst case scenario. And I've put myself mentally in a place where I've been like, this is so bad in my head, but I could be fine on the outside and everything's fine in my life, but in my head it's like I don't want to be here anymore. And I've
yeah.
had that a few times where I've been a bit like, I don't think I can carry on with what's going on in my head because
It's just too
when
much.
is it
Yeah,
when's it going to go away? When's it going to go away? And it's just um it's horrible. And it's kind of like you don't really want to do a lot. You struggle to have any motivation to get up and do anything.
yeah.
Um it's just shit. It's just really shit. So when I first started talking about mental health, I could never differentiate between anxiety and depression, which
But
is
the
pretty
thing is,
shit when you're starting a podcast.
but the thing is, right, is so I've studied this and also had um, been diagnosed with different things, and everything's so like comorbid to each other. So what that means is that that two diagnoses can be linked, and so like anxiety symptoms are very similar to depression symptoms. Like you can have low mood. So do you get what I mean? Like they're all so intertwined and so similar, and I
Mhm.
think a lot of them don't come like one doesn't usually come without the other. So yeah, that makes sense why you couldn't differentiate between the two. But so interesting. So you're 26. You're a guy. Never really spoke about your mental health. Didn't even know what you were experiencing. So that just goes to show that you really didn't talk about it. How was that? And like, do you remember the first time you spoke to your guy mates about what you were going through?
Yeah, look, I'll be up front as well. So, firstly, I still find it difficult to speak to blokes about mental health stuff. I'll chat about it on Instagram, and like people message me and um are like, oh yeah, like that's a great bit of advice, and like I can like resonate with some of the stuff I post, but it still scares me to speak about it. Um, which sounds quite contradictory because I'm always like, oh, don't be scared to speak about like what you're going through and stuff. But it is scary, and I think the reason it's still scary is because you still have people that try and shit over it a little bit. Um, but
Absolutely.
I mean, it's getting better, but it's still there. So I thought I'd say that just to sort of be like,
No, I
it
appreciate
is
it.
still stereotyped.
It is, and I appreciate you saying that. I think it's important to recognize that because even as a female, I wear my heart on my sleeve. I'm always been so emotional, very deep thinker, um, not afraid to say how I feel, which is sometimes a good and a bad thing. But, you know, even with this podcast and, you know, any of my friends who are listening, I love them so much, but I know that they don't get it. And I know that they're like very like for some of them, without them outwardly saying it, I know they're thinking, why is she speaking so openly about her mental health experiences online? And I still feel that. I think it all comes back to the caring what people think. So you've got like lots of followers now on Instagram, and you've done live speaking and all the rest of it, and you're like building a real like community and lifestyle out of this. It's still, I don't know if it's the same for you, and I mean I'm like way smaller than you are, but it still feels like weird. And like every time I do it, I do have this thing in the back of my mind where I'm thinking, oh my gosh, what about if someone sees this? Like so many people that I am friends with in Australia don't know about this podcast, don't know about this page.
Okay.
And a few of them have been like, by the way, I found your podcast on TikTok, or, you know, it randomly came up my feed and I'm like, oh my gosh, that's so embarrassing. Like, I don't want people to know, like, I don't want people to know about this. So it is weird that you say that because I feel exactly the same.
It's weird, but I think what you got to think as well is we're doing good stuff, because if we weren't doing it,
Who would be doing it?
there would be one or two less people not speaking about it. That's what always pops into my head. If we weren't speaking about this, there'd be other people speaking about it, but there'd be two less people. And I think that's what you've got to think about. The more people that speak about this shit, the easier it becomes for everybody else, because there'll be people listening to this thinking, oh, like Emily's really brave for speaking about that. She's putting her heart on her sleeve. She's like being really open. I'm going to speak to somebody about it, and that's kind of what I always go back to. There was something I posted. It's like 2 years ago now, and it was kind of like a WhatsApp conversation between two mates, because I create these scenarios that I think, oh, this could help somebody, because some people don't know how to speak to their friends about stuff like this. Like I still don't. I still don't know how to start that conversation sometimes. But I create these scenarios where I'm like, this is how I'd want to be spoken to, or this is how I would react if one of my mates messaged me about their mental health and if they were struggling. So I just put these little conversations out to try and help people speak about it. And this guy that I don't know wrote on it, I spoke to my mate about my mental health yesterday. Thanks for posting this. And I'm like, that's amazing. Like
That's what it's all about, isn't it?
that's what I wanted it to do. That's what I wanted it to do. And it was like, it's the cliche thing of it's helped one person, so it's served its purpose sort of thing. But
I completely agree with
when you get that, it's just like, that's why we have to do this.
Yeah, you can't even describe the feeling, like, and I've had that a few times with this podcast, and I think it really is about blocking out the noise and just keeping going with it, and thinking about the purpose and the reason why you started this. And, you know, it's so interesting that you started this for you, actually. This was like your journal and your blog. And so just by you telling your story and using this as your vent and outlet, you've actually helped like thousands of people in the process as well. But I want to talk a little bit about your sobriety, because as one of the things that you've done to help manage your mental health, firstly, what was your relationship like with alcohol before?
It's a weird one, because I would never put myself in the category of being an alcoholic. I was never addicted to alcohol, but it had, I don't know, it had a negative effect on me. So I've always been one of those people where I'd go out to get drunk. So I'd drink to get drunk, to forget, to try and feel better, to try and make myself feel less anxious in social situations. Because, like I said, I deal with groups. I'm better now, but I used to deal with group situations very badly. So you know, like when you go out with your mates and you're in like a little circle and there's, I don't know, like 10 of you standing there drinking, I'll be the one that's just standing there with his pint. Just, I don't know how to start a conversation here. I don't know what to say. how to say it, if I start speaking, I will look like an absolute dick.
Oh,
I'm one of those people that if we're speaking like this on a one-to-one, I'm all right. But if it's a group situation, I really struggle. So I used to drink to try and get past that a lot of the time, especially if I was out with like my guy mates. I'd just drink to try and have a voice, if that makes sense. But I think I've always gone out to get drunk. I think that was part of the problem, and the thing that was the last straw for me was I drank quite a lot during lockdown. So during lockdown, there was nothing to do, was there? So you just finish work at home. You'd be
yeah.
like, well, what can I do? Watch TV. That was literally it. So I would literally finish a Zoom call at work at 5 o'clock, crack open a beer, and just drink. And it wouldn't be to the point where I'm just like, I'm going to get absolutely hammered at home, because like that wasn't me. But it got to that point where I was like, oh, this is becoming too common, where I'm having a drink or a couple of drinks every day. And there's been a few instances over the years where I've sort of pushed it, where I've put myself in very dangerous situations with drink, where like one scenario was I was on holiday with my wife, and we like had holiday friends. We made friends on holiday and like went out drinking with them, like around the resort. And I just wandered off, and the hotel was on a cliff, so that wasn't fun. And my wife was basically in the hotel room for the whole night, worrying that I'd walked off a cliff. And I woke up in the morning in a bush outside the hotel, bitten to death by bugs, and walked back into the hotel room, and I was like, I have no idea what I've done. I don't know what I've done. I don't know where I've been. And that happened a few times. I put myself in those sort of situations a couple of times, and it got to the point where I was like, I can't do this anymore. I can't put myself in those dangerous situations where alcohol's literally dictating what I do, potentially with my life. I could have killed myself.
Yeah, and I guess
Um,
only you then in that situation. It's your wife that's then also affected
yeah.
by your drinking behaviour.
So it's just a bit like it's make or break, really. It's like I can either carry on down this horrible path where I'm just getting blackout drunk for no reason, like no real reason, or I can just
Stop
go
drinking.
completely sober. Yeah. And I knew, so it sounds weird, but I knew I could do it because I'm one of those people where, like with the 110Ks in a row, once I've got something in my head, I have to do it. And it's been the same with not drinking. So I stopped drinking 2 years ago yesterday, and I was like, I wake up the next morning, I couldn't remember anything, and I was like, I'm not
This is
drinking
it.
again.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not drinking again. I know I can do it, and it has just been like that ever since. And it's been hard. It's been hard at times, but it's so much easier now, and it's got easier because there's so many more people doing it. There's so much more variety of alcohol free drinks. And
Yeah.
it's been easier year on year, I'd say.
And how has your life changed since you became sober?
I'd like to say I've lost weight, but I haven't, which which is what it's really fun. A lot of people give up alcohol and they lose weight, but I think I've just like put it on through food.
Maybe using the as like the dopamine thing. It's like,
Yeah, yeah. I no, it's I don't really know how it's. I mean, it's changed. It's changed my life in a lot of ways because you save a lot of money because you're obviously not going out getting drunk
yeah,
at all. Um, you don't have hangovers, which is amazing. Um, because again, when you get blackout drunk and you wake up the next morning, it's just the worst feeling of like I feel sick, I feel anxious. It's disgusting. It's changed my relationship with my wife. Like we have such a better relationship because like she doesn't she didn't drink a lot anyway, but she barely drinks now either. So it's just I don't know. It's just it cleared my head,
Yeah.
which has then helped my relationships with other people, I'd say.
And
Um,
and do you think it's helped you? Do you think your last 2 years of the stress sessions would have been the same if you were still drinking?
I don't know. I don't
Do
know.
you
That's a good
do you think
question.
do you think that it affected your like productivity and motivation? Because from a personal perspective, I'm definitely considering going sober. Um, like being like vulnerable and open as always on these conversations. I speak openly about my mental health and, behind the scenes, I'm, I love a party. I am a bit of a party girl, I'll be honest. Um, and I do recognize that no, I'm not an alcoholic, but I don't know when to stop. And I think that's where the
Hmm.
problem lies. It's like, and I'll know when to stop when I'm with certain people, but I'm very easily influenced. So if I'm in a group of people who want to stay out, want to keep drinking, even though I know in the back of my mind I need to go home and I'm going to feel terrible tomorrow, I still continue drinking. And then for me, it's how it affects me the next day. So yeah, not only a hangover, but any small amount of alcohol will affect how I exercise the next day, how I work the next day. I feel tired and like I feel like for me, it's more than just health change. Like it's actually about how much can I actually achieve if drink wasn't in the picture? Like how many days do I spend hungover and like doing like 50% when I could be doing 80%, if that makes sense. And so that's why I asked the question, do you think that like you are more productive and more motivated since you've stopped drinking?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Then because I've done stuff over the last 2 years that I would have never been able to do if I'd have still been drinking. So the swimming, I wouldn't have started doing the swimming because like why? I wouldn't be getting up at 6 o'clock in the morning to go for a swim on a Wednesday, and I wouldn't be getting up at 9 o'clock on a Saturday to go swimming. Like it just wouldn't have happened. And it's stuff like the running. I wouldn't have ran 110 k's in a row because I definitely would have drank on one of those days. Like I definitely would have drank on at least a quarter of those days and been hungover on probably like I don't know 10% of them. So it's just I wouldn't have been able to do a lot of like my like sporting stuff that I've done, but then I think it's also helped me with I don't know. It sounds really weird, but because I stopped drinking, I felt like I need to try and be more confident in certain situations. So, for instance, like with work, with my day job, I've tried to push myself out of my comfort zone with that more because I know that I won't ever have that hungover feeling or that anxious hangover feeling, or I won't ever be in work feeling shit like that sort of thing. And it's I don't know if it's a good thing or not. And I've one thing I've never done is ever said to somebody, "Oh, you should go sober. Oh, you should try this because it's really great." And I put stuff up on social media saying, "Oh, it's really helped me in this way, and it's like helped my life in this way." But I'd never say, "Oh, you should go sober because like you'll be mental not to do that because it really helped your mental health." Blah blah. But the amount of people that have sort of been drawn in by it has been like really interesting. And it's like one of my friends, and she won't mind me saying it, but she's like a big drinker. She loves to drink. She's Scottish, so like she loves it. Um, and she messaged me at the start. It's the start of this year, and she's like, "Oh, I'm going to do dry January," and I was like, "Oh, cool." And I was like, "Really?" And she voice noted me like every week, going, "I've done another week. I've done another week." Blah blah. And I was like, the person I expected least to be doing this has been sort of drawn in. So it's just really interesting, like how even if you don't try and influence other people, how they get drawn in by that positivity. I think just by like living that lifestyle yourself, people are like, oh, I want a little bit of that. So they sort of dip their toe in and try it for a month. And then it's, I think, again, like other people on like Instagram, like I've seen it and been like, oh, I'm going to try that. Like, yeah, I don't know. It's just nice to see people like being like, oh, I'll give that a go sort of thing. Cause it's had a positive impact on me. Oh, I think you're on mute.
Cool. And it is interesting because it was your post. I've seen a lot of posts, but it was your post again, the like 2 months sober that you did, 2 years sober, sorry, that you did the other day. And I saw it and I was just like, oh gosh. And I think and I think you have to get to a point where drink is negatively affecting your life enough, like with you, that you know that it could be better. And so there's nothing, you either stay the same or you change. And like, and it's when what's the quote? When staying the same is harder than like making a change, or what, I can't remember the exact quote, but like if I stay the same and keep drinking in the way that I do, like I'm not terrible, but I do like spend a lot of times waking up thinking, why have I done that again? Like, do I keep doing that, or do I just do the difficult thing and stop drinking? And that leads quite nicely onto the next question that I have, and that's around being sober in social situations, because I think that's where I struggle the most. Is like if I went out and didn't drink and I'm in a social situation where everybody's drinking, and I associate social situations with alcohol, how do you break that cycle?
It's hard. It's really hard. So I think you have to own it. You have to own being sober. Like not like screaming it from the rooftops or anything like that, but you have to not go into it thinking, oh, everybody's gonna think I'm like weird for not drinking, and you have to go into it like I'm sober, I'm doing this for me, and nobody's gonna break me with it. And there's been situations where I've been embarrassed to be like, I'm not drinking. And one of them was really, really, really early on, and it was because I stopped 2 years ago around Christmas, and stopping drinking around Christmas is hard because you're just surrounded by alcohol. But
Yeah.
there was a point it's probably just after, I think it's between Christmas and New Year 2 years ago, and I went to the pub to watch football with it's my brother-in-law, father-in-law, and like their uncle, and this is my wife's uncle, and he's quite a big drinker, and it sounds really weird, but I just like obviously my brother-in-law and father-in-law knew that I'd stopped drinking and like really supportive of it and everything, but because he's quite a big drinker and he's quite opinionated and not opinionated, he'll just say stuff how it is, sort of thing. And I was like, I really don't want to tell him that I'm not drinking, and I didn't tell him. But when he was like, oh, what do you want to drink? I was like, oh, can I have one of those 0%, I think it's like Brooklyn After Effects. And he's like, oh, why are you having that? And I was like, I don't fancy it today. And he's like, oh, all right. And I was, you just thought I'll just test the water by seeing how he reacts to that.
Yeah.
And then he was like, oh no, yeah, all right then. And I was like, oh, I didn't expect that. But there's been some social situations that have been really hard. So like I went to my first wedding last year, and it was in the summer, everybody's drinking, it's really hot. And the way I sort of like tackled it was I bought my own alcohol-free drinks with me. So
Yeah.
it's my brother-in-law's wedding, and he was like, oh yeah, there's 0% Heineken's behind the bar. I've checked with the venue, blah blah and all that. So I was like, oh, that's cool. Like that's nice to know. So I can still have a few beers. But I bought my own alcohol-free stuff with me in the boot of the car. So there was I was literally there like with those. So you know the brand Kaleno.
Yes. Yeah.
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 So they do the little miniature boxes. So you get like a little, so it's like a tonic one and a sort of rum sort of one, and they come with like a can of
So,
ginger beer and something
so
else, like sparkling
yeah,
one. So I was just there, like with my glass, like did it, and then everybody's like, "What are you doing?" And I was like, "I'm just getting my own alcohol-free stuff out of the car." And everybody's like, "Oh, can I try some?" And look, people get suckered in. So it's a bit like if you own those situations where you're like, "Yeah, I'm not drinking,"
and just stick
it
to it.
yeah, it really helps. But there have been some situations where I've been like, "Oh no, that's made me feel a bit shit," and it's been when I've been. So we went to Bali last year for a holiday, and there were two situations where people sort of were a bit like, "Oh, you're not drinking, that's boring," and I was a bit like, "Fuck you," sort of thing. Um,
Like,
but it's
so I'm going to wake up and feel way
yeah,
better
yeah,
tomorrow.
yeah. But one of them was I was in the pool at the hotel, just drinking like a alcohol-free beer in the pool, and this guy swam past and was like, "Oh, what are you drinking? I've not seen that one before." And I showed him, and he's like, "Oh, why would you drink that? It's 0%." And I was like, "Because I want to." Like,
What's
but
what's
most yeah,
yeah,
exactly. But most of the time, like I think in social situations, if you put those things in place where you're like, I'll tell people and be upfront so they know, so you sort of know how they're going to react already. Surround yourself with people that do support you with it, because 99% of the time people will be supportive because you're obviously doing it for the right reasons. But then just have like backup things, like bring your own alcohol free stuff to places, and just I don't know. For me, I've just made it a game, so I'm just a bit like, oh, I'm 2 years, but I'll just keep being like, oh, it's 2 years a month, 2 years 2 months, and I've seen people be a bit like, oh, once I hit 1,000 days, I'm going to stop counting because like I've hit 1,000 days and it's long enough. But I'm a bit like, no, it's a game to me. It's a challenge, so I'm going to just keep doing it my own way. But I think it's just treating it as your own little personal thing.
yeah, I love that. I mean, congratulations because you've got some serious willpower to be able to do that, and it isn't easy to. I don't think in society today, when everything is so revolved around drinking, to just quit. Um, but aside from sobriety, what are some of the other things that you do on a daily basis that help you manage your anxiety and depression?
So one of them's really cliche, but it's just talking, and it's one what you said about like what what are the big sort of changes that have happened since I've been like since I started the stress session, stuff like that. One of them's just been the whole talking aspect of it, and I know it's like I put stuff out there going, oh yeah, talk to your mates, talk to your family, and don't keep stuff bottled up. But it's true. Like when you find somebody that just listens to you and you can talk to really open. Like, so for me, it's my wife, and I think I we're just so open with each other that when we've always been like open with each other, like just in general with like in our relationship or whatever.
Yeah,
But since we've both started talking about our mental health, we're now able to support each other mentally as well. So it's a bit like our relationship's bettered because we're now able to have those conversations without feeling awkward about them. So
so
that's the big thing for me. And one thing I know it's quite cliche, but even if you don't know, even if somebody speaks to you about their mental health, so even if they open up to you and you don't know what to say, just by listening to that person opening up, it's going to be helping them. Because I've had situations in the past where I've spoken to somebody that's been like, "Oh yeah, speak to me." They've not known what to say, but that's fine. Like, the listening part is the thing that counts. You don't have to be like, "Oh, that's I'll be there for you all the time," but all that. It's just the being able to listen aspect is huge.
yeah, and I think being non-judgmental and also like I've got friends as well who are a little bit like that who maybe don't know how to deal with their emotions and have never really spoken about mental health, never experienced mental health and all those sorts of things. And so yeah, don't know how to respond to it. But what they might do is just check in on me and say, "You feeling okay?" and like taking it on board and just recognizing that someone isn't okay in that moment and just checking in and letting that person know that you are there. Um, because I genuinely think like just having one person like your wife or whoever it is that you can just talk to, whether it not even be a family or friend and it's a therapist, somebody that gets you and that listens and that tries to understand at least, I think is so important. But outside of your wife and speaking to somebody, what would you say is the biggest like behavioral self-care, like life behavior that you engage in? That makes sense.
As in, like, stuff that I do? Or...
Yeah. So obviously you do like running, you do your cold water dips. What do you think out of all of the things that you engage in, what is the most beneficial?
I'd say the best thing, so the best in the moment thing is probably breathing,
Okay.
which is really simple. But,
Yeah.
and again, me and my wife do it when we've had a shit day. We'll so I'll get in from work, she'll get in from work, or whoever's work from home, whatever, and we'll be like, oh, I've had a really shit day, blah blah, and then we'll be like, right, go and breathe, and we'll literally sit in a room on the floor, and there's this 10-minute anxiety meditation video on YouTube, and it's literally 10 minutes long. We'll put that on, and literally 99 times out of 100, once we've done that, we'll feel, I say we, it's like one person, like, I will feel 100 times better because you've sort of just taken that time out, and it's especially when you finish work, it just really separates the day, and particularly when you're working from home, you feel like you're just trapped in that one place a lot of the time. And once you've done that 10-minute breathing exercise, meditation sort of thing, whatever you want to call it, it helps me a lot, and it sort of helps ground you. It's really weird because it's just such a simple little video, but I know it works for other people too, because in the company I used to work for, I did like a little mental health talk there, and I put this 10-minute video on for them to do this breathing exercise amongst this presentation I was doing about mental health, and everybody was just so quiet and really got into it, and just
Yeah. It is. It's
it
incredible.
was great.
Yeah. I mean, I'd only just started doing it. I think I actually joined a call once with a coach, not mental health related at all. And she was like, do you mind if we just do something before we start this conversation? It helps with like creativity and stuff like that. And just helps like ground us. And we just did like 4 deep breaths in, holding, and then okay, the last time, nearly done, it's fine. Yeah, 4 deep breaths in, hold, and then breathe out. And I felt so different after, like, I felt lighter. It's crazy. Um, so we are coming to the end, but just a few more questions around stress sessions and everything. So you have a full-time job alongside the stress sessions. So is your day-to-day job anything related to mental health? And do you enjoy it more than your other job that you hated?
Oh yeah, right. So yes, I do like it more than the job I hated. So it's sort of linked, but not. So I work in communications, so I write, and I never know how to describe my job. I write stuff, so I write like updates, website stuff.
Mm. Like PR.
Yeah, so like internal PR. Yeah. Um, and it's sort of linked. But the company I work for now is a health and wellbeing company. So
So cool.
I've been here for been in this job now for 5 months. So it's quite recent. So, and I picked this job because I was a bit like, oh, it's really linked into what I do outside of work. So yeah, it is sort of linked, but not,
Did
because I look
do you think
after
questions helped you
HR
get?
and finance.
Do you think that the stress session?
Not.
Not
I don't
really.
think so. No. Do you know what though? The previous job that I had, it did, because I I just started the stress sessions, and mentioned it in the interview, and it was really weird, because I was a bit like, when I was getting interviewed, I was a bit like, I feel like I can open up a bit here. And during the
Mm,
interview, I started speaking about my mental health, and I was like, I've done this because I've struggled with my mental health, so I started this podcast, blah blah blah.
yeah,
I was quite open about it, so I think it helped me get my previous job because it was, I don't know, like the interviewer just obviously thought, oh, this is pretty cool that he's
yeah,
opened
yeah,
up about this. Yeah,
yeah. And do people at your current work know about the stress sessions?
yeah, yeah. Yeah, so I've been there for 5 months now, and I've tried to sort of dip my toe in being open about it. But you're just a bit like, I don't want to go all guns blazing with like, oh, I do this podcast, and it's, yeah, like I love doing X, Y, Z. But I've sort of tried to get involved in any sort of mental healthy stuff that goes on in the company, and I don't mind speaking about my experiences, but I I think, like you said, with like the people that like your friends in Australia now, that people have been, um like, sort of just come across it, and it's just a bit like, oh, I don't like that. It's
Yeah,
really, because it's kind of a bit like, so when you're like, you've got two friend groups, but those two friend groups have never met, and you're like, I don't ever want them to meet. It's a bit like that.
it is
Yeah,
like that. It's exactly like that. And it's like, well, Emily, you're putting your stuff out on social media for the world to see. Like, of course, you are the
yeah,
potential
yeah, yeah.
to see it, but I'm like, God, why? Um, so, what are your plans with the stress sessions? Obviously, you did the live event not that long ago now. Is there any plans? Um, have you got any like podcast plans? Because I know obviously you do the live events and you do a lot of like content on your social media, and then you've also got the podcast as well. But I think you mentioned you haven't recorded for a while. So, is there anything in the pipeline?
Honestly, I don't know at the minute. I've still got a few episodes to put out that I recorded at the start of the year. So that's how shit I've been with my content. Um, but I don't, honestly don't know. I like what I'm doing at the minute, because it's just kind of a bit like, I feel like, because again, opening up, I've struggled quite a lot over the last couple of months, so I've just not really had that
Capacity to,
energy. Yeah, I've not really had the energy to be doing stuff like that at the minute. And I think it is, when you do, well, when you are struggling, it is good to sort of know when to stop. And I feel like, since the live show, I've been a bit like, oh, I don't really know what to do with the podcast now, but that's all right.
oh,
And I feel like the more you put yourself under the pressure of, I've got to do this, I've got to put out X amount of episodes, it just stresses me out more, which is not the desired effects for what I want it
yeah,
to be doing. But
it's
I don't really know. I don't really know what I want to do with it. I mean, I I'd quite want to record more episodes, but probably not yet. Um, but no, I don't know.
it's interesting, isn't it? Because I feel like it's the same for me with Dose. Like when I got to Australia, I was like, I just want to just enjoy my time here. To be honest, I just want to enjoy my time in Australia, and I don't really want to think about that for a little bit, because it is like you're giving your so much of your energy to this page, and like and I want to do it, but at some point you have to take a step back and be like, right, okay, like actually, like I'm not in a great place right now. I can't give my 100% to these people if I'm struggling.
Mhm.
And especially when you're having these podcast conversations, the amount of podcasts in the past that I've had to reschedule. Well, not that many, but like I have had to reschedule. Been like, I can't have this conversation today. Like I'm not okay. How can I expect to listen to someone else's conversation about how they're not okay or how they've not been okay? And I think that you have to be honest with yourself about that. So coming to the end of the podcast now, thank you for everything that you've shared, by the way. I could literally speak to you for so long about your experience. But if there is somebody listening who is struggling with anxiety, depression, maybe even alcohol addiction, what would be the one piece of advice that you would give them?
I think for me, it would be if you're really struggling right now and it feels like you're taking a step or two back, that's okay because you're just rerouting yourself. So you might need to take a step back or start by step with what you're doing, see if that's your job or your life in terms of like little changes to help yourself. If you're taking a step back from things, that's fine because you're just going in a different direction to move forward again.
Yeah.
I think I've had that a few times in my life where I've been like, I need to change something, but to change that one thing, I need to go back a little bit and take a bit of a back step. And by doing that, I can then, I can move forward again now. And that's a positive. But I think it's not sort of being too hard on yourself for taking that step back, because you will begin to move forward again eventually. But it's just giving yourself that time to do that, if that makes sense.
No, it makes complete sense. And I think with mental health, it is a journey, as cliche as that sounds, but it definitely is. And there will be good days, there will be bad days, there will be moments where you might have to quit that job that you hate, but it pays well and it's comfortable, but that's making you unhappy. And so you have to do that and take that step back, maybe move back in with your parents, maybe lend some money. I don't know, do all those things that are really uncomfortable. But ultimately, in making that step, you can then take some time for yourself and, find a job that you like, for example. So I completely understand with what you said there. And it was very, very important. But thank you, Luke, for being on here. I'm glad that we finally got this conversation. I don't have my podcast equipment as planned, but it's not gone quite, it wasn't quite as perfect, but that's life. And I think the content and everything that we've spoken about has been so interesting, and I'm sure that you've helped lots of people listening today. So thank you for being here.
No, thank you for having me. And it's not about the equipment, it's about the content and like us. The most important thing is we're having this conversation, and it's going back to the thing of we're two more people speaking about this thing that lots of people struggle to talk about. So it's amazing.